Welcome back to another installment of Everything NHL, the hockey segment of the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and we're here with our hockey expert, James Kumar.
Hey, what's up, man?
So for this episode, we're gonna, go over Thursday and Friday's games. We'll talk about some fantasy playoff pool strategies. We'll do a preview of round one for the NHL playoffs, and we'll take a look at Saturday's games.
All right, sounds good. Let's hop into it.
All right, so we'll start with Thursday's games, starting with the Minnesota Wild versus the St. Louis Blues. Very dominant performance, to say the least, by the St. Louis Blues. They were able to score 7 goals to Minnesota's 3. All of Minnesota's goals came in the first period with Nico Sturm, Ryan Suter, and Marcus Foligno. And in the second period, we had Zach Sanford, Braden Shen, David Perron, and Braden Shen again. So he had 2 goals for St. Louis. And in the third period, David Perron had a third goal, and Jordan Kyrou had 2. And what do you think about this performance by St. Louis?
Yeah, St. Louis has been one of the hotter teams in the league heading into the playoffs lately, and they just proved to be too much for Minnesota. They lost to them. I believe it was 4-0 the day before. I'm not 100% sure, but then St. Louis had beaten Minnesota 4-0, and then this game here, Minnesota came out to a 3-0 lead, and I guess they just couldn't hold on, and then the floodgates just opened for the Blues.
This is kind of surprising because Minnesota is a very good defensive team, and they have a very good goaltender in Cam Talbot, and they still got 7 goals scored on them.
I am not 100% sure that Cam Talbot played in this game. Yeah, he didn't. It was backup goalie Capo Kakinen. So, I don't think Talbot would have played that way considering the way he's played this season. So, I think going into the playoffs, you can bet for sure that Talbot will be between the pipes for the Wild.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess moving on to our next game, we have the Vancouver Canucks versus the Calgary Flames. Dominant performance by Calgary. They were able to beat the Canucks by 3 goals. The Canucks had only 1 goal in the first period by Matthew Highmore. The Flames had 2 goals by Rasmus Andersson and Andrew Mangiapane. And no goals in the second period, but in the third period, Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk both had goals for Calgary. And what do you think about these two teams?
These two teams are just finishing their remaining games left in the regular season. Both aren't playoff teams, so this is pretty much just them finishing the last bit of the season. So I wouldn't read too much into it. Vancouver is definitely a lottery team this year from the way it's looking. So I don't think they're really in any position to be winning games like this. So
Yeah, I guess it's been kind of disappointing for both teams. Calgary was trying to make a playoff push. They fired their coach, got another coach with playoff experience to, I guess, hopefully in hopes that they would make the playoffs again. And Vancouver, they still they remember the taste of when they were a dominant playoff team. They're trying to get back to that. So hopefully next year they'll be more competitive.
yeah, for sure. Calgary, they just have a lot of things to work out with their team. And then Vancouver, I think their team's still pretty young, so they shouldn't read too much into this year. There were a lot of injuries and like COVID scares and those kind of things. So they should have a better year next year.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess moving on to the next game, we have another dominant performance by Colorado against the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings only had 1 goal this entire game by Sean Walker in the first period. The Avalanche had 5 goals. Actually, all 5 of them were in the second period by Tyson Jost. He had 2 goals. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare had one. Jonas Donskoy had one, and Andre Burakovsky had one goal, and no goals in the third period. And what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I know Nathan McKinnon was not playing in this game for Colorado, and that didn't really matter. The Avalanche were determined to win the President's Trophy for the most points in the league, and they got this clutch win, and they won the West Division, they won the President's Trophy, so they're heading straight into the playoffs, as hot as they could be.
Yeah, I mean, this Colorado team, I mean, they really lived up to their name, Avalanche. They've just been burying teams with their high-powered offense. So, what do you think we can expect from them?
Oh yeah, this team should be very dominant in the playoffs, no questions asked.
For sure. And I guess we can move on to Friday's game. I think it just finished, and we have the Maple Leafs versus the Jets. Kind of a disappointing performance for the Maple Leafs. The Jets were able to win 4-2. In the first period, we had Pierre Engvall for the Leafs. In the second period, we had I think Mason Appleton for the Jets, Ilya Mikheyev for the Leafs, and Kyle Connor for the Jets. And in the third period, we had Kyle Connor with another goal for the Jets and Jansen Harkins for the Jets again. And I guess this was kind of, I guess, a result that the Leafs weren't really expecting. So do you think this is just kind of a one-off kind of thing, or is it something to kind of watch out for?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a one-off. I know Mitch Marner didn't play for Toronto. Other players weren't in the lineup for the Leafs. They'll definitely be rested and healthy and ready to go for their series against Montreal. And then as for Winnipeg, I think this was pretty much a must-win for them. They've been pretty cold. You want to get a win heading into the playoffs, and that's exactly what the Jets did in their last game of the season.
Yeah, I think the Jets, they kind of have a tough run ahead of them. So getting a win against I guess, the best team in the division, at least in terms of points, in terms of depth, whatever metric that you want, getting a team against the Leafs is going to be a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess any win at this point is just more momentum heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I guess for the Leafs, they just kind of have to brush off this loss. I mean, they are still the best team in the division. They have the best record, so they just kind of have to have confidence in their game.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of games, I know they lost them, but they didn't have their full lineup in. So I'm not really reading too much into it. I know some people might, but I think, yeah, you're right. They can just brush it off and just sort of head into the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we can kind of move on to some playoff pool strategies. So, if you know, I guess if there's anybody out there who's in a playoff pool for fantasy, what advice do you have for them?
Actually, before we get into playoff pools, I should check our fantasy regular season pool. I know we aren't doing a playoff pool this year, but let's see what the standings are looking like. And I am now down by 2 points to our injury expert, Victoria. So the season's not done. The season finishes on Wednesday with the Canucks against the Flames. So I still have a chance to catch up. I need to check if she has any players from either of those two teams. No, she doesn't. So um, I believe I have Quinn Hughes. So it is possible for me to catch up there. Um, yeah, I have Quinn Hughes. So he's got to get at least however many points to catch up. So 2 points, I think. Yeah. He'll need 3 points for me to win, 2 points to tie. So I think it's going to come down to that. So hopefully he plays, and if he plays and he scores some points, then I guess I'll win. And if not, then we'll definitely have to get our injury expert on here for some sort of analysis.
Yeah, for sure. It's literally a down to the wire pool this year.
It's pretty insane how that happened, but yeah, it's just when there's a lot of injuries and people are missing players, sometimes it just comes down to the wire. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, I guess that's why she's the injury expert.
Yeah, it probably had less injuries than my team. My team was just better overall. I mean, not to brag, but yeah, injuries kind of hurt me a little bit. But yeah, we'll definitely see how this thing finishes up.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about, I guess, fantasy hockey playoff pools. So, what are some tips that you have for people?
Okay, so basically, when you're playing in a playoff pool, either you're in a pool with your friends, sort of like a fantasy season where you draft all of the players onto separate teams, or some playoff pools you just have to pick. Like you're in a pool with like thousands of people, so you got to just pick from a list of players. So there's two different ways to approach it. Obviously, if you're in like a draft with your friends, then you're kind of looking for I guess just players that you think will outperform the players that other people are choosing. Like you're pretty much trying to construct your team. You have to know where your draft where your draft position is. You got to know different things like that. But I know a lot of people just for the playoffs they pick from a list of players. So I'll just get into some of the different strategies you can use in both formats. The first tip I have is try not to load up your pool with one specific team. So let's just say you love Tampa Bay's chances of repeating for the Stanley Cup, and then for forwards you picked like Kucherov, Stamkos, and Braden Point, and your defensemen were like Hedman and Sergachev, and your goalie was like Vasilevsky. And then well, let's just say Tampa Bay goes out in the first round, then you're pretty much like done for your pool. You won't have a good chance of winning. So you want to spread out your picks. You want to select from a few different teams, and that sort of leads into my second strategy, and that's to pick from teams that you believe will win at least one round in the playoffs. So that means that those players will be playing at least half of the playoffs because they would be in two rounds. So then you'll be getting sort of the average amount of points from each player. So let's just say you're picking a few different teams. If you think Toronto's getting out of round one, then maybe let's say you pick Mitch Marner on your team. If you think the Oilers are getting out of round one, then you can pick maybe someone like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, or maybe like Tyson Barrie or something. Then if you think Vegas is going to win, you can pick like Marc-Andre Fleury as your goalie, stuff like that. So you sort of want to pick from the teams you think are actually going to win their series. Because if you just fill up with the best players from any random team, then you might have the best players on your team, but if they get eliminated, then you're not going to have points for the rest of the playoffs. So you got to sort of balance it among teams you believe will win at least one round. And then some teams will even go further than just winning one round. They could win two or three or even win the cup. So, yeah, it's definitely a good thing to balance because if your players are at least getting past round one, then you have an excellent chance of winning your pool. Um, and that'll move me into goalies. For the third strategy, some pools do goalie tandems where you just pick a team's goalies. So let's just say, I think for goalie tandems, Vegas is probably number one right now. You'd get both Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner, no matter who plays. You would get the stats for that tandem. So stuff like that. And then there's like actual goalies. So you would pick like Marc-Andre Fleury by himself. Some leagues do different things. I think there's different strategies in terms of drafting both ways. For tandems, you sort of look for, I guess, the backup goalie that can really support the starting goalie. So yeah, Vegas would be the best team. But if you're looking for individual goalies, you look for a guy that's pretty much going to play every game. That's a guy like Andre Vasilevsky for Tampa Bay, um, or maybe like Tuukka Rask for Boston, that kind of thing. Those guys would be a little bit higher. And then for tandems, you get like maybe Vegas Golden Knights, Fleury and Lehner, Toronto's Campbell and Anderson. You might get different other top end goalie tandems. So yeah, just something to look at. Just deciding like knowing your format and then just sort of deciding how you want to pick. Like I said, for goalies as well, make sure that they are winning at least one round so that you will have goalies till at least round two. So that's definitely a strategy. When you have later round picks, if you're in a draft format, definitely take a look at some sleeper picks, guys with a lot of upside. If you're just drafting um, guys that might get you a few points here and there, you might not have a chance to win the league. You win the league if you can find those upside sleeper players that have potential to break through during the playoffs. They might be a deeper player on like a top end team that might be making a playoff run, stuff like that, you want to look for to sort of round out your team. You have some stars, and then you have some sleeper players that have star potential and that could be seen in the playoffs. So that's definitely something to look for in your drafts. And then when you're picking defensemen, look for a proven scoring track record, because I know a lot of times people will just like pick a defenseman just because they're on a good team. When it comes to the playoffs, you need points. Guys like Victor Hedman last year. I know when Dallas was in Miro Heiskanen, those guys, we knew they could score. So if you pick guys like that, usually the top scoring defensemen usually still score in the playoffs. So that's something to look for. And as well as defensemen that have like high end exposure. So let's just say a guy like Cale Makar from Colorado, he's on the top power play. So he's getting exposed to guys like McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, big names, right? So he could be getting secondary assists off these guys' goals, and then that's still points for you, right? So when you're drafting defensemen, definitely look for that proven scoring track record and top end exposure, and that'll definitely help you round out your pool. So those are just some of the strategies that I have for drafting fantasy pools, and yeah, just depending on the kind of league you're in. Obviously, like you select different players, just keep those things in mind and you should be able to do well in your playoff pools.
Those sounds like some pretty good general tips. I think they can carry over to pretty much any format.
Yeah, I didn't want to dive into specifically points leagues, category leagues, pools, drafts, and I was just trying to be general. So yeah, those are some general things they can look for.
Sounds good. So I guess now we can kind of move on to our preview of round one. So I'll give my pick for each series, and then you'll give your pick for that series, and then do some analysis for that. So how does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's dive into it.
All right. So I guess we'll start with the Colorado Avalanche versus the St. Louis Blues. I put the Avalanche in 5. I just felt like Colorado had a better offense overall than St. Louis, and I thought it's probably going to go down to offense. So I guess we'll have yours.
Yeah, I just want to take a look at that series. I also like Colorado in 5 games, and I guess just breaking down the series, I'll just take a look at some of the different things. You mentioned offense. Colorado did have the edge in offense. They scored almost 200 goals in 56 games. That is pretty insane. That's almost 4 goals a game. So that's a team that can put up offense against pretty much anybody. And Colorado, they also had the defensive edge as well. They only allowed 132 goals on the season compared to St. Louis, allowing over 160. So I'd give Colorado the edge there. The goaltending edge, I'd also give it to Colorado. I know some people say, oh, Jordan Binnington won the Stanley Cup with St. Louis, but he has not had the same type of season that he had during his cup run. Philip Grubauer has been a top 5 goalie in the NHL this year in terms of stats. And he just continues to put up the wins. So I give Colorado the edge there. I guess just going into the coaching aspect, I will give the edge to St. Louis because Craig Berube has led this team to a Stanley Cup. So I think that St. Louis does have that experience. They do have that experience edge over Colorado, mixed in there with solid coaching. Not to knock Jared Bednar, as he is a solid coach for Colorado, but I would give the slight edge to St. Louis. And then just looking at the special teams, Colorado had a better combined power play and penalty kill than St. Louis did. Power play clicking at 22.7% and penalty kill at 83.1%. So really solid. And then just one last look at things. The season series between Colorado and St. Louis. Colorado won 5 out of the 8 games, so very solid. I'm just looking at Colorado being more healthy heading into the series, and just them overwhelming the St. Louis team. In my mind, this could be between a sweep. Maybe St. Louis can steal 1 or 2. So I have this series going to Colorado in 5 games. That's just sort of what I'm seeing in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I think St. Louis, they have their work cut out for them. If they somehow beat the Avalanche, they probably have to face Vegas next, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty crazy run if they actually make it to the finals. That'd probably be one of the craziest runs in the past few years.
Yeah, for sure. don't see a healthy Colorado team getting beat. I know if Colorado is shorthanded, that would definitely benefit St. Louis a little bit. It would put them sort of in a position to potentially take the series, but a healthy Colorado team should be able to get through.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess next we'll, I guess, take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights versus the Minnesota Wild. I put Vegas beating the Minnesota Wild in 6. I just thought the Vegas Golden Knights were deeper than Minnesota, but we'll go to you.
Yeah, I also like Vegas in 6 games. I feel like that they could win it in less, but the reason I have it in 6, I'll go to the series first. Minnesota won the season series 5-3. I don't know how many of the games featured Robert Lehner or Marc-Andre Fleury, but I believe Vegas will be riding Marc-Andre Fleury in the playoffs this year, and he's had such a solid record this season. I don't see him dropping more than 1 or 2 games. So I was generous to Minnesota by giving them the 2 wins there, but yeah, Vegas should win in 5 or 6, definitely. Just looking at the offenses here, Vegas edged them in offense by 10 goals this year, and Vegas was better defensively by more than 30 goals. So definitely Vegas is the better team on both sides of the rink. And then the goaltending edge, obviously I have to give it to Vegas. Marc-Andre Fleury had one of the best years of his career, even in his mid-30s. So good on him. The coaching edge, have to give it to Vegas because Pete DeBoer is their coach. He's been to the Stanley Cup final multiple times. He's coached many successful franchises. And for Minnesota, I'm just not confident that they'll get the same coaching that Vegas has. And then just looking at the special teams, yeah, Vegas was just dominant. Their power play was only 17.8%, but their penalty kill was 86.8%. I believe that was top 5 in the NHL. So Vegas had a really strong penalty kill. And I know Minnesota's power play struggled a lot this year. So I think that Vegas definitely has the edge there. So yeah, Vegas can pretty much beat Minnesota on every aspect of the ice. Um, I just can't give Minnesota a reason to win this series other than they won the season series against Vegas. Um, yeah, but I definitely see Vegas being the stronger team here, and they should be healthy for this series. So I like Vegas going through.
Yeah. I mean, Vegas has been like arguably the best team in the West for the NHL in a long time. So it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, for most of the season they were on top. I know Colorado just passed them near the end. Um, if both teams do get through, that second round matchup between Colorado and Vegas will be uh, I guess electric is probably the best word to use. Like it's the top 2 point teams in the league, so you're pretty much getting a potential Stanley Cup final matchup in the second round. So yeah, those 2 teams, I would take a major upset to eliminate one of these 2 teams before the second round. Let me just say that.
Yeah, I guess assuming we do see them in the second round, we might see some crazy scores like 7-6 or something.
Yeah, I mean, or it could be tight games like 2-1. Like the 2 teams could just play each other tight. Like you might be right in the sense that like from one game to the next, it could be really high powered offense, and then the next game like really solid defense. It could just be back and forth like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we'll move on to our next matchup. We have the Maple Leafs versus the Canadiens. I put the Leafs in 6. I just felt like the Leafs are deeper, but I think the Canadiens, I guess they have a shot if Carey Price is fully healthy. That'll give them a huge boost, and I guess it'll put them in the game. But I think that the Leafs should still be able to take it.
Yeah, for sure. Just looking at some of the stats here for this series, the offensive edge goes to Toronto. They've averaged almost 30 goals more than Montreal over the season. The defensive edge also goes to Toronto. They've allowed less goals than Montreal has in the season. And the goaltending edge, obviously, I have to give it to Montreal if Carey Price is healthy. Toronto definitely has some questions that need to be answered, whether they start Jack Campbell or Freddie Anderson. I do believe they'll start Jack Campbell because of how hot he's been. But yeah, assuming Montreal has Carey Price, he's easily the best goalie in this series, so I'd give them the advantage there. For coaches, both coaches are relatively new. Sorry. I definitely give the edge to Toronto Sheldon Keefe, as he does have an AHL Calder Cup championship, and he's won at pretty much every level except the NHL. It's his second year in the NHL, and he's already a division title winner. So Montreal's intern coach just came in this year, not a lot of experience to his name. So I definitely edge Toronto there. I give the edge to Toronto there in the coaching. And then for special teams, Toronto was the better team, 20.3% power play, 78.3% penalty kill. Um, yeah, I think Toronto's power play did struggle a little bit near the end of the season, but at 20%, they're scoring out of one out of every five power plays. So once every two games, at least they should be getting a power play goal. So that's definitely an advantage for them. And then the season series, they played each other 10 times. Toronto won the season series 7-3, really dominant. Um, yeah, I know a lot of those games Carey Price was not healthy. And the way that Price really changes his game for the playoffs and becomes so dominant, I really can't give the Leafs a sweep here, even if I wanted to. If Price is not himself, it could be a 4 to 5 game series favoring the Leafs, or even if Jake Allen plays in net. But if Carey Price is in net, this could be a 6 or 7 game series. So I'm going to say Toronto wins the series in 6 games.
Sounds good. And I guess we can move on to our next series, which would be the Edmonton Oilers versus the Winnipeg Jets. I just put the Oilers in 6, so I guess I'll go back to you.
Just looking at the series, take a bit of a dive into it. Edmonton, one of the best offensive teams in the league. They outscored the Jets by over 10 goals over the season. The defensive edge, I'd say it was pretty even in this series. I know that the Oilers do have sort of a 2 goal edge, but they still have 1 game remaining, so they could allow a couple goals. So I'd say defensively, these two teams are about even on the season. The goaltending edge, I will give it to Winnipeg because Connor Hellebuck was the Vezina winner last year for goalie of the year. So he definitely can be a game changer for this Jets team. For the coaching edge, I also decided to give it to Winnipeg because of how long Paul Maurice has been a head coach in the NHL. He's taken teams to Stanley Cup finals and so on. Not that Dave Tippett is a bad coach, it's that he just doesn't have the resume that Paul Maurice has. This is also pretty even in terms of coaching. I will definitely have to see which coaching style prevails in this series. Special teams edge has to go to the Oilers. They had the number one power play in the league at almost 30%, 28.1%. Their penalty kill was also 82.2%. So this team is just so solid on the special teams. Edmonton solid on at 5-on-5. They're just a really strong team overall. And they demolished the season series, winning 7 out of 9 games against the Jets. So as much as I do like the Jets team, the way they match up against the Oilers stylistically, it was just proved in the season that Edmonton can handle this Jets team. So I do like the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games. Could they finish it faster than that? Yeah. And I think if the Jets win, the only way I see them winning this series would be in 7 games. So I'll definitely take the Oilers in 6.
Sounds good. And I guess we'll move on to Pittsburgh versus New York Islanders. I put Pittsburgh in 7, but we'll go back to you.
Yeah, just diving into this series, if you are watching on YouTube, you can see I am wearing my Sidney Crosby Pittsburgh Penguins jersey because I do believe Pittsburgh will win this series. They dominated the season series 6-2. They played really solid against the Islanders. They actually beat the Islanders at their own game, which was low scoring affairs. Pittsburgh can really play a solid defense this year. I know the offensive edge definitely went to Pittsburgh. They outscored the New York Islanders by more than 40 goals. So if these games become high scoring, it definitely favors Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was not bad defensively. They only allowed 155 goals, but the Islanders only allowed 125. So you can kind of see that both teams are good defensively, but the Islanders were one of the best teams in the league. For goaltending edge, I had to give it to the New York Islanders and Semyon Varlamov because of Tristan Jarry's early season struggles for the Penguins. Varlamov had just been more solid over the year. I believe he was close to the league lead in shutouts, if not the league leader. So he definitely did play really solid this season. For coaching edge, this was very close. Mike Sullivan has won Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Barry Trotz has also won Stanley Cups. The only reason I'll give it to the edge a little bit to Barry Trotz is because he did sweep the Pittsburgh Penguins the last time they played in a series against each other. So I think the coaching edge is pretty even, but I'll lean it towards the Islanders. Special teams. The Islanders surprisingly 18.8% of the power play, 83.7% of the penalty kill overall, better than Pittsburgh's numbers. Pittsburgh definitely the better power play though. So I guess just as a scoring team, Pittsburgh seems to be better. Um, this series could go either way. I'm saying Pittsburgh in 7. It could be earlier than that. I know the Islanders swept them the last time they met, so maybe Pittsburgh sweeps them this time. But um, with the series being so difficult to pick and the stats so even between the two teams, I am leaning towards Pittsburgh. They have the home ice advantage, which matters for American teams because they have fans. And yeah, a lot of these metrics, including the season series, really favors Pittsburgh. So I like Pittsburgh in 7 here.
Sounds good. And I guess we can move on to Washington versus Boston. Both very strong teams, but I decided to put Washington in 7, especially if Ovechkin is healthy and ready to go. So I guess, what do you think?
Yeah, that's one of the major questions for Washington is the health of their team. Um, their season series with Boston was tied at 4-4. So these teams are pretty much as even as can get. Um, the offensive edge went to Washington by just over 20 goals. Boston had the defensive edge by just over 20 goals as well. So both of these teams pretty even when it comes to offense and defense. Just looking at the goaltending edge, I had to give it to the Boston Bruins because Tuukka Rask has been so solid this season. He has only like 4 or 5 regulation losses on the entire season. He's been so solid. And then Washington's goaltending situation is complicated. I believe they'll be starting Vitek Vanacek, the rookie, in the playoffs. Ilya Samsonov, of course, had the COVID situation to deal with. Vanacek was rookie of the month in January, so we definitely can't sleep on him. He was a very solid goalie this year. He got Washington to a second place finish in their division, but I still would favor Rask a little bit because of his playoff experience. Going to the coaching edge, both coaches are really solid. I will favor Peter Laviolette because he has won the Stanley Cup as a head coach before. He has gone to the Stanley Cup finals multiple times, and usually the team that hires him gets a boost in the first year that he's a part of their team. And he is a first-year coach for the Washington Capitals, so I think he'll definitely give them a boost in this series. Looking at the special teams edge, Washington is one of the best special teams in the entire league. They have a 24.8% power play and an 84% penalty kill. Just so solid. You really can't do much on the against them or pretty much anything on special teams. Um, yeah, this series, it's going to come down to the health of Washington's players. If Ovechkin's healthy, Kuznetsov's healthy, if they get the goaltending, they can definitely take this series. I am going to slightly give it to Boston in 7 because of Boston's playoff experience as well. They went to the Stanley Cup final 2 years ago. They went to the second round last season, so they're a very solid team. Um, they just play so well defensively, good coaching, good goaltending. Um, like I said, the series can go either way, but I'm going to pick Boston at 7.
All right. And I guess we can move on to Carolina versus Nashville. Nashville's a good team, but they definitely have their work cut out for them in one of the strongest and most consistent teams in the Central Division. So I decided to put Carolina in 5. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think Carolina in 4 or 5. The reason I would probably say 5 is just because I would give Nashville a win. But looking at some of the stats, offensive edge, Carolina by 20 or more goals they scored this season. Defensive edge, Carolina, they allowed 20 less goals than Nashville did this season. Goaltending edge, I'd say it's pretty even. UC Saros had a career year this year, but Peter Mrazek has been so steady and solid these past two seasons. So I'd have to call that an even split. Coaching wise, I'd say Rod Brindamore is a better and more experienced coach than John Hines. I think Carolina is really solid with him behind the bench. He's also a former captain of their team, so definitely a boost there. Special teams, Carolina, one of the best in the league, 25.6 power play and an 85.2% penalty kill. They can do it with the best in the league, which is why they were first place in the Central. Season series goes to Carolina 6-2. They did lose the last two meetings to Nashville, but I believe they were resting some players. So I don't believe that we should read too deep into those games. UC Saros could steal one game, maybe two, but if he just really can't do anything against this Carolina offense, it could be a 4-game sweep. But like I said, I will give them the benefit of the doubt for one game and give it to Carolina in 5 games.
Sounds good. I mean, hopefully, Nashville will be able to put up a fight and they'll be able to at least get one win in the series.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I mean, it's possible for any team to beat any team, like in the NHL. Like, it's a little bit easier than it would be in maybe NFL or NBA, just because of teams. There just being a lot more parity in the NHL when it comes to teams. Um, so it is possible that Nashville could beat Carolina. It's very highly unlikely just because of how good Carolina has been this year. But yeah, I just see Carolina being very dominant in this series.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess moving on to our last series, two very dominant teams, Florida and Tampa Bay. I feel like it could go either way, but I decided to put Florida in 7. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is the closest series in the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. How fitting, because these are both teams from the state of Florida. They've never faced in a playoff series before. I know things definitely got heated between the two teams in the season series, so this will be a fantastic playoff series in my mind. Very hard fought. Everyone's saying 7 games. I'm going to say 7 games as well. Just looking at the stats, Florida does have the offensive edge this season, 188 to 180. I know Tampa Bay did not have Steven Stamkos for a large portion of the season and did not have Nikita Kucherov for the entire season. So I think that those affected the offensive numbers a little bit. Looking at the defensive edge, Tampa Bay had it, but only about 5 or 6 goals. Of course, Andre Vasilevsky being their goalie, I give them the goalie edge there as well. Tampa Bay, they have pretty much one of the best goalies in the league. You can't doubt that. And then for coaching edge, I feel like it's pretty even. I will edge it towards Florida because of Joel Quenneville's success in Chicago, winning 3 Stanley Cups, compared to John Cooper for Tampa Bay, having just won the Stanley Cup last season. Um, Slight edge there, but this should be a great coaching battle as well. Special teams edge, Tampa Bay, one of the best in the league, 22.4% power play, 84.2% penalty kill. They just know how to do it on special teams. Season series, Florida won 5-3. It was 3-3 heading into the final 2 games of the season, where Florida completely dominated Tampa Bay. But I fully expect Tampa Bay to be healthy. They announced that Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, Ryan McDonough, Victor Hedman, and the rest of the team will be healthy heading into the playoff series. And I know Florida will not have Aaron Ekblad for this series, their top defenseman. Um, Florida could still win this series because of their high-powered offense. I believe they still have a deeper offense than Tampa Bay, even with these players coming back. But in terms of defense and goaltending, I just don't see it happening. It's going to go to 7 games most likely, but I think Tampa Bay is going to pull through.
Yeah, for sure. I guess this is the start of an interesting rivalry. We have the Battle of Alberta in the north, and now um, we have the Battle of Florida.
Yeah, for sure. First time them ever facing in a playoff series. They've never been good at the same time, which is why they've never faced in the playoffs. And yeah, it's clear by the rivalry this season that these two teams clearly don't like each other. So it's going to be a hard fought series, to say the least.
Yeah, I guess this could be an interesting division rivalry, at least for the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. They're always going to be in the same division, so we could never doubt that.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess now we'll take a look at some of Saturday's games, just kind of a preview. And uh, the I guess the first game would be Vancouver Canucks versus the Edmonton Oilers. I guess we could probably take the Oilers on this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tune-up game. Connor McDavid did say he is playing, so it looks like the Oilers will not be resting any players before the playoffs. So the Oilers are the better team here. They're at home. If Mike Smith plays in goal, you can pretty much pencil in a win for this Oilers team.
All right. And moving on to our second game on Saturday, we have the Boston Bruins versus the Washington Capitals. So basically a preview into the playoffs. Who do you think is going to take this?
Actually, I believe this is the first game of the series, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there is a bit of an overlap between teams finishing their games and the playoffs. So yeah, this will be the official first game of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Boston Bruins at the Washington Capitals. Um, it's going to depend on the health of Washington's players. If they come out relatively healthy, I can see them taking game one at home. But if Ovechkin or Kuznetsov or any of these guys are missing out of the lineup, look for Boston to sort of capitalize on that and take game one.
All right. And I think that's about it for our preview. I think there's only two games on Saturday. So that about wraps up this installment of Everything NHL. If you like our content, if you watch us on YouTube, you can subscribe, hit the notification bell. You'll see our videos every week. If you like to listen to podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple Music. You can definitely give us a follow there. If you like our picks, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at FanFanPodcast. We've posted some UFC picks from our UFC expert. You should. So definitely take a look at our page. We've put the page for the UFC expert on there as well. So definitely give them a follow as well. And tune in next week for another installment of Everything NHL.